Welcome to the policy meeting of October 21st of the Frederick County Board of Education. I call this meeting to order at 11:03. We're going to look at the draft minutes. Ms. Barrett, are you with us?
Hi, yes, I am. Thanks for letting me join by phone.
Sure, absolutely. Glad we could make it happen. We, not me, the tech people. Thanks for being here. So, draft minutes. Ms. Jarman, Ms. Barrett, any issues?
No, they look good.
Fine. Minutes are accepted as is. That's great. Moving on, we go to the graduation requirements, which we looked at last time, and we had some recommendations that were reflected in our minutes. And this is a combination of 3 into 1, I believe. So, Ms. Cannon?
Yeah, so we looked at merging policy 422 and 433 within this, as it all relates to the topic of graduation. Dr. Alavito provided some information regarding Maryland high school assessments, and we thought that was good clarifying information. And then one piece of important feedback that the policy committee asked me to insert was at the very end that the board would annually review the policy and provide notification to the community, so that each time we are looking at this, that was just very critically important information of high value to the community. So I think the committee said this will be important as one that we just want to do an annual review because it'll trigger the annual notification.
Yes, and we also wanted it disseminated in some way, like from the website, or something like that. I believe that was a part of it, so that the public knew. So it's there, it's available to them. Is that correct? Ms. Alavito, Dr. Lippy? Okay, yes, good. Ms. Barrett, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Ms. Jarman?
None whatsoever.
So, Ms. Cannon, we take this to consent agenda.
Okay. Okay, that's marked for
Alrighty.
consent.
Okay.
The next one is policy 439 regarding dress code. And so we thought it would be important, and I think corresponding counties throughout the nation have looked at this relative to just really raising the importance of mask. Not only that it's a requirement to wear, but also too if they're inappropriate or disruptive. So we want to capture that under dress code. We also capture it under our student disciplinary regs. But also too importantly, there are some medical exemptions. So we want to identify that in the board policy as well.
Yeah, the exemption is over here on page 2 under policy statement. And the face coverings, mask is the kind of the common one. That's what most of us are wearing. But there are also the gaiters that come up from the neck that people wear. This would be
Well, we
broad enough
intentionally
to
kept
cover
it
that?
broad because Faye and I did look at different definitions and what's the conclusion about different ones, and I think that's inconclusive, and I think there are a lot of variations, and so we just thought we'd keep it broad intentionally for now.
Yes, keep it simple, and I think that's appropriate as well.
Well, and I think students too are finding out, as well as adults, on what's comfortable or what modifications might have to be made for what they wear. And things along those lines. And I think this is still really evolving in different types that you can wear and different modifications for people that have hearing impairments, et cetera. So again, that was another reason we didn't want to adopt any one agency's definition.
And the fashion industry will be stepping in before long.
Well, let's hope so.
Okay.
And I really like the fact that it is included that it must cover the nose.
Yes.
As I'm in observing for my job at Shepherd, I have noticed often that it doesn't cover the nose. So that's enforceable because it's part of policy, correct?
Yes, and that is something we found consistent.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Any questions from Ms. Jarman or Ms. Barrett?
I do have one question. What would then be considered an identified exemption? Would that be, is that a medical excuse? Is that unless excused by an identified exemption.
Right, so there's, I think, and Paul, I know you know, oh, good, Paul is here. I think there's now, are there 14 identified exemptions?
Okay.
If you're under a certain age, if you have certain breathing problems, those that are identified,
Okay.
that have changed. So we didn't want to say as identified here, and these are.
Gotcha,
But they
understood.
have been identified.
Thank you for that clarification.
And like if you're engaged in rigorous physical activity, so I'm just thinking of a couple off the top of my head, but that's what we would indicate. And we could link the identified exemptions in the policy.
What they'll be changing.
Well, they haven't changed in a while, have they?
But if
Then
they
that would be
change, are they
nice.
then updated wherever they exist? So if there's a link to them, then
Well, I would say that Faye is very good. So right now, because we've had to change several links throughout this as things have developed.
Okay.
And so one change triggers then two others, but anything that's linked to the identification is typically pretty easy to follow.
Okay.
So we could link it. I think our schools know it, but I think it would be important for our parents to know it as well.
That's what I was thinking. A
Yeah.
community, the community in general.
Yeah.
Yes, they may wonder whether what they have or what their child has is one of the exemptions and not necessarily know where to find it. And if they're dealing with our school system, it'd be nice if our school system could provide it. I know that there's a ripple effect every time we link something. We have to go to
Right.
2 or 3 sites to do it. We had to do that when we started our online curriculum. Every time we changed something in one place, we had to change it in 4 or 5 others.
Well, there's two options. One, we could link it, or two, we can footnote it. You know, sometimes I do love to use footnotes. You know, where the footnote, that way I don't have to link it and I'm going somewhere, it's in the footnote, these are the identified exemptions. And it's gonna be pretty small, but you'll be able to see them as far as what they are.
I was
listed
just thinking
as.
that if the community were to access it, I mean, and I don't know that they would, but to have it readily available, because as I look at it, I would, you know, an identified exemption, what is that?
Ms. Barrett?
Yeah, I mean, the language that's in here is fine with me. I'm a little bit, I don't have a good word this morning. The issue that I have is that the face and mask covering that folks are using to prevent the spread of COVID they're not attire, right? It's not a article or aspect of personal appearance. It's a health and safety thing. And I recognize that people can have, they can choose their decorations and it can become an article of personal appearance, but that's not the intended purpose. And I guess I understand that we need to incorporate it here. I don't know, I'm just having, I don't know that I just am confused because it's not you can take it off to eat.
You should.
Yeah, I mean, that's I just am not sure that we don't keep this in health and safety stuff rather than the dress code.
So the reason why we wanted to identify it under dress code is because there are a lot of masks out there now that have some inappropriate things on, that would be
Okay.
contrary to the mission of the school system, that would advocate drinking, drugs, profane messages, those kinds of
Okay.
things.
Got it, okay. Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
So do we move it to consent rather than a work session?
I think so.
I don't think anybody on the board will have an issue. If we have to explain it, they can pull it from consent. So is that okay with everybody?
I'm okay.
Yep.
Okay,
All right,
consent.
thank you. Okay, and The next one is Policy 200. This has to do with school attendance and redistricting, and we did an updated change under C. This was just really kind of in the routine review, actually, prior to COVID, so we just pulled it back up. That's why I just peeked back there, but then I know that we've had some recent discussion on this topic, and so we just kind of updated this relative to making sure that it mirrored the language under the law, but I know that there's been some additional conversation, and Mr. Lebo, I don't know if you have anything that I think you had reviewed this change. Did you have anything else you wanted to comment?
On the C and D change?
Yes.
Page 5, okay.
I didn't have any comments related to the recommended changes on C and D. I know at the last board meeting, there was some discussion about whether or not we should include some other language about school closures, and if there were other triggers that should be included in the policy related to bringing forward potential school closure decisions to the board. Did some analysis of other districts throughout the state. Some are very similarly aligned to us, where they just included the COMAR citation and what those factors are that ought to be considered. Some districts have actual triggers in there related to student enrollments. For example, Howard County uses the number of 275 students or less at the elementary level, 450 at the middle school level, and 800 students at the high school level to trigger a conversation with their board. Other districts, I have not found any in Maryland yet, but I have not been through all 24 yet, but I have heard that some also link that to a percentage of state rated capacity. So as an example, if you reach 60% of your state rated capacity, would that trigger a conversation with the board about a potential closure? So that was some of the initial information. Ms. Pellegrino and I are still working on the total cost of ownership and the other fiscal information that you had asked for. We ought to be able to have that available for you at the next policy committee.
Thank you, Mr. Lebo. I was the one that asked. I appreciate you not pointing the finger at me. But yes, I was the one that asked for that. And these are actually the three that I had in mind, that percentage of state rated capacity, the cost of running the building, at what point is the tipping point for the number of students that are there versus the maintenance cost and the ongoing cost of upkeep, as well as employees. We have the per pupil expenditures now that are coming out that we are keeping track of and have to, so they can be added into the mix. And what other districts are doing, really, I don't know. I don't usually find that persuasive. I want to do what's best for us. So if we could get those numbers, that would go under A, or I would assume, or someplace else. But for today, thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it. I knew we would have to come back to that at a different time, and it might actually be a different policy committee by the time we get to it, because I have one more meeting in November, and that's it. But this, let's talk about C and D, and if Ms. Barrett or Ms. Jarman have any questions or comments on C and D.
No, I don't.
I don't either.
No. And I was shaking my head, and you can't hear that.
And the criteria that's listed under A is identified. COMAR says at a minimum you have to look at these factors.
Right.
But then that last factor said, or any other factors that the board wants to direct staff to evaluate. So one option would be you could put it on work session for discussion. If you feel like, based on the last board meeting, the board wants to continue to look at this, have that data come back, then that would give you November 11th to have information, if you felt like you wanted to have a bigger discussion on the factors.
I think there should be a bigger discussion on the factors, but I'm not going to put a timeline on our staff to get those numbers. Enough to do right now. So this was just me saying it's a direction I'd like to see the system go. It's not a you have to do this by then. No, I'm not going to do that to these guys. They're hard enough right now. So my question to you is, do we take this for consent to approve those two sections and then come back at a later date when we know that Ms. Pellegrino and Mr. Lebo have had an opportunity to pull together some numbers so that the board can have a discussion intelligently in a work session?
Well, my recommendation would be, this could go into consent, but it doesn't have to be November 11th. You can make it the meeting after that, and then that gives an intervening timeline for staff to come in and chat with you versus bringing it back twice. That's a suggestion. We can bring it back twice. You can put it on consent November 11th. We can come back, and if the board has any additional changes, we'll bring it back again. So I would just defer to Mr. Lebo as far as a realistic timeline.
I think we can have a reasonable conversation at the next board meeting. I don't see a reason.
November 11th? Okay. Well, then
Wow.
let's put it, I mean, hey.
Okay?
Well, and I don't think this was a new topic that we haven't explored before, and so, because I think we've had some conversation about this in the past when we've had to, because this is a tough issue. When we were talking about it before, I think we kind of were, Dr. Albin had asked staff to do some research based on that. So based on that, then my recommendation would be, let's put it on work session for November 11th, and then we'll have Paul and Leslie share additional information, and we'll indicate to the full board that the changes under C and D, the policy committee recommends adoption, but
Right.
we'll have discussion then on A.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Okay, moving right along.
This is policy 108, unused school system property. And I believe the only edit we had here was just the Comart reference.
That's all I saw.
And again, this was just kind of in the queue. I went back to the 100s just to see. So, anytime I'm bringing a policy, I do send it to the staff person just to say, hey, I'm looking at this. I'm doing the legal edits. Is there anything new or substantive that you want us to bring? And so there were no additional staff recommendations on this.
Okay, I think we move it to consent.
Okay?
Good.
Meetings.
I think that one's you.
No, that's not the
Oh, no, okay, I'm
CAC.
sorry, I thought
This is
that was
the
your CAC discussion, I jumped
definition of
ahead.
meetings.
Yeah, that was one I felt that I was holding off adding this because I kept thinking life was gonna return normal. And so I just think because we are meeting differently and it's probably going to continue and it could be in a state of flux, to go ahead and add this definition.
Yes.
I agree. I agree.
Okay. And I think that Catherine has done a fantastic job adapting very quickly to identify how we're going to meet to ensure flexibility, safety, and compliance with the Open Meetings Act.
I agree.
And
Agreed.
so in any given time or any given year, if we have that, that way it's in your policy and you can adapt accordingly.
Perfect.
Moving
right.
to consent.
Approved for consent.
Okay, and the last one, so Ms. Barrett and Ms. Jarman can get back to work, is back to our Citizens Advisory Council. When the board got this at the end of a long meeting, there wasn't a whole lot to say, except the term of office. They wanted the policy addressing which, in the first year, it says in term of office, during the first year, one half the Citizens Advisory Council shall have a 3-year term and the other half shall have a 2-year term. It will revert to 2 years after the second year, so that one half is on and one half is off. So the question that the board had was, how would we identify who gets the 2-year term and who gets the 3-year term? So that was basically a discussion for the three of us and Ms. Cannon. So does anybody have any suggestions? We're doing this by, if you remember, by 2 representatives from each feeder pattern. So do we say that the elementary representatives, identify them as a 2 or 3, or the secondary is a 2 or 3, or do we go alphabetically by the school feeder patterns and say every other one? First one is a 2-year, second one's a 3-year. How do you want to do this? Do you want to draw names from a hat? Any suggestions from Ms. Barrett or Ms. Jarman? Because I can do any of those.
Yeah, I think that a 3-year term is pretty daunting to a lot of people. I think when you volunteer for something, that's a long time. And I think we should ask for a preference on application for the term lengths, and then as the committee is comprised and the selections are made, try to balance it.
Okay, so we would be the ones to balance it, assuming that we get enough people that want a 2-year term.
That's what I was just gonna say, or enough that want a 3-year term.
Or enough that want a 3-year term,
If everybody opts for
that's
the
true.
2-year, then what do we do?
We could change the
Yeah.
3 to a 1 and make it 1 and 2. Either way would just be able to alternate. And that was really my goal. My goal was alternating, not
Yeah.
length of term. So,
I feel like
Stagger.
3 years is really daunting.
yeah, I can agree with that after serving 4. So, yeah, I understand. Would you think 1 would be better rather than 3, 1 and 2?
I think 1 might be more appealing to, however, 1 is a short time period, especially for a new committee that,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just feel like during the first year, so we would stand up a committee. It's almost like the first year that you assign, you get a 2-year term, and then as there's attrition, it's either a 1-year or a 2-year term. I think when you're setting up new goals and stuff, it's nice to have the continuity. I don't know.
This is a conundrum.
I think we agreed that 3 might be too long.
But I don't, I chair the grants committee for the Women's Giving Circle, and our term is 3 years. And I feel like for the committee members, the first year is the learning, the second year is getting your feet on the ground, and then the third year is kind of passing it on to the next generation. And I've had very few who have not done their full 3-year term. So I don't know, I just feel like that first year is, when we looked at the equity committee, and that first year was just sort of figuring direction out, and yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards the 3 and 2, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. If you're talking about a group of people who are representing elementary, they may not have elementary schoolers by the time they're done serving, so
Okay.
there's that to consider.
That's-
Listen, this isn't, as a busy parent of kids in the system, 3 years sounds like no way, Jose, to me. So.
It is a commitment. So I liked your idea of them choosing, so
Yeah.
then what we do is we will work on the application and ask people to choose, and we will have to put in a disclaimer of sorts that says that the board will be attempting to balance the 2 and 3 year terms, so they may not get what they would like, and we will leave it up to them. Some type of a disclaimer like that. But to offer a 2 or 3 year, which was your initial suggestion, Ms. Barrett. Otherwise, we're going to sit here and argue over whether 1, 2, or 3 years is the best for anybody. But letting them choose, I think that,
And honor to the extent possible.
yes, an honor to the extent possible.
Yeah, and they can always quit early too if they don't
Yeah.
want to.
Well, that'll happen. That happens no matter
Yeah, I
what.
was just trying to avoid that drag of it. So. Cool.
So, yeah, thank you for that. Now, Ms. Cannon and Ms. Zimmerman, will you guys be able to make sure that the language of this matches the language in our Policy 101 on the Citizens Advisory Council B? I know we have some red language in there, but I want to make sure that it matches
Yeah, we'll make sure it
this
aligns, and
document.
then, of course, I'm assuming you'll want this linked. So if I'm interested in Citizens Advisory Council, if I hit Citizens Advisory Council, then it gives me this detail.
Yes.
Okay, that's what we've done with our other committees. But yeah, I think we did look like that, and I don't think there's anything that's not aligned, but we will certainly double check.
So I'll tell you what I copied was the bottom of the sheet to have based on feedback.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation at the bottom, and it says CAC may, and it's starting with the C5 here.
Yes.
The last part, that's
That's exactly where
So
we
the,
pulled
the
from.
bottom portion of this, Ms. Barrett, you didn't hear that. Citizens Advisory Council may, seeks, and all the bullet points are what was combined together for the Policy 101 section of the Citizens Advisory Council. So it does match. So the next step would be, I guess, to get notification out to the public and set some parameters and dates in an application. And I guess that would be up to Catherine to work with, to make that happen.
Yep.
Okay, so next steps.
Yeah, because, let me just see, we'll finalize the attached document. Okay, so I think we do have to bring it back one more time for consent, don't we? Because the board has not
Yes.
approved the new red language.
Yeah, so
I'm
let's,
sorry, we've been just working on this one for a while, so I just want to make sure.
I know it.
We're at the finish line. We're at the finish line. We're gonna go.
Yep.
So
Okay.
my recommendation is let's put the red changes on consent. We'll link in your additional document, and then Faye can work with Catherine to get it advertised
Works for me.
after the, board adopts it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do November 11th, consent. And then work to advertise. Okay.
All right. To the best of my knowledge, there was no public comment?
Nice.
No? No public comment. Then, at this point, I would say, Ms. Barrett, you can go back to work and taking care of your family. Ms.
And go to my
Jarman, you can
dean's
head out,
council
and this
meeting.
meeting is
Yeah, look.
adjourned.
All right, thanks, everybody.
boy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Talk soon.